Good afternoon, Retreat Church. Thank you again for joining us online as we look to the Word in the middle of the week. And today we're going to look at Acts chapter 9, a very important thought coming right out of that text. Encourage you to read that in its entirety. You'll hear a wonderful story about a conversion. We know that this man, Saul, was converted into Paul. Right in this very chapter, God confronts him in a way that is undeniable, that Paul can no longer push against and no longer deny. In fact, he was pushing very hard. As we know, he was the one that was destroying the church, but when God converted him, he became a man that God was using to build the church. And that is amazing that God continues to do that to the day today. Takes people that really want nothing to do with Christianity, want nothing to do with the church. Maybe even they've steered people in a direction that is opposite of what God would have them to be directed in. But God is in that business of converting people. But he does it sometimes in ways that a lot of people don't see. A lot of this conversion stuff starts on the inside of us, starts with things that God is doing behind the scenes, things that sometimes are unnoticeable. And then he calls other people into our life. And that's where this man by the name of Ananias comes in. See, Ananias had no idea that God was working in the heart of Saul, soon to become Paul. Had no idea. In fact, Ananias was afraid of Saul, had heard all the rumors, what the many were talking about. This man, Saul, that was going from town to town, dragging off Christians, dragging them off and having them in prison, having them killed. He was in chapter 6, approving the stoning death of Stephen. And so that whole community not only knew about Saul, but was afraid of Saul. So when God comes to Ananias and he says, "Hey, Ananias, I want you to go and I want you to meet with this guy named Saul who is praying." And Ananias makes that statement to the Lord. He goes, Lord, do you know that what many say about this man Saul? And see, this man Ananias is being called on by God to move into Saul's life at the time of his conversion. But all Ananias knows is what the many were saying about Saul. They had no idea. He had no idea what God was doing in Saul's life. And you know what? That makes the point of what I want to share with you today. As God is calling you into divine appointments with people, as God is calling you into a place where you are to reach out to those, you have no idea what God is doing in the life of people as he calls you to meet with them. You don't know what their road has been like leading to that specific point. So as you and I follow those divine appointments that God makes for us, may we be attuned to the voice of God. May we be so attuned to the voice of God that we forget what the many are saying about the people that God is calling us to meet. Because I believe that you can be an Ananias. God can call you into the life of someone that he has been working on up until this point. God has been ministering to them. God has been reaching out to them. God has been shaping them and changing them. And God understands that you play a very important role in their future ministry. And God is calling you into divine appointments that you have to realize that God is working in people's lives even though you don't see it. God is working in people's lives that they have a reputation or they're well known for all of the wrong things, all of the bad things. But God is calling you and I to be attentive enough to what he is doing in their life. Because the reality is you and I, we really don't understand exactly where people have been. God knows that. You might have information, you might have facts, you might have some knowledge about people and about where they've been, but you have no idea sometimes the way God has been working in their life. If you were Ananias or I was Ananias, all we would know about Saul is all of the negative things. The fact that he was there at Stephen's stoning. The fact that he was going from town to town and destroying the church and persecuting followers of Jesus. That's all the information that we would have. But notice that God calls Ananias to ignore those pieces of information and to step into the reality that God had been working in the life of Saul. And that God had great plans for Saul. That God had books of the Bible to be written by Saul. God had churches to be planted by Saul. And we know this man as a wonderful biblical author, as a wonderful apostle to the Gentiles. That's how we know him. But God had to start that work when everybody else that knew Saul knew him as something totally different. And so right now, God is working in people's lives. God is working in people's lives in ways that you and I don't see or don't understand. And we have to trust that when God calls us into their life, that we don't know the road that they've been walking. We don't know the road that God has had them on. And we don't know the road that God will take them further on. And I'm standing here today by this beautiful view, and you could probably hear behind me as one Jeep just goes by. You can hear this traffic going by. These people driving this highway, many of them coming from Big Bear back down into the valley, maybe to Redlands, Yucaipa. Some people going up from Yucaipa, from Redlands, up into Big Bear. And you see that right there is just a big assumption, isn't it? See, I'm assuming that's where people are going because that's the road in which I see in front of me. That's my knowledge. That's my assumption. I can just assume that these cars are going to some of those destinations. But in reality, I really don't know. I really have no clue where they're going. I really have no clue about where they've been, where they're coming from. But in this moment, God is working, I pray, in their life as another car goes down the road and he's talking on his cell phone as driving down a mountain road. That's always safe. Pray that God works in his life. But as you today reflect upon how God is meeting your needs and putting you in the lives of other people, can you agree with me that we have no real idea where they've been or the potential of where God might take them? All we are supposed to do is be attentive to the words of God as he speaks in our hearts, and as we listen to him, and as we seek him and call and ask him to put us in divine appointments so that we can be that Ananias for some modern day Saul becoming Paul. I pray that we would do that, and I pray that all of us that are following Christ in the midst of the turmoil that we live in today, that we are not so caught up in all of it that we're not listening and not hearing God and not stepping into those divine appointments. God bless you. We'll see you next time.